Welcome back to our next talk of the day. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome the COO and founder of Alliance, the host of the Second in Command podcast, international speaker, and best-selling author of 5 books, Cameron Herold.
Hey, Ross. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. We're delighted that you could join us for the summit and really looking forward to diving into some of the knowledge that you've got to share. So I guess great place to start for anyone that hasn't come across you. Who is Cameron Herold?
All right. Who's Cameron Herold? Well, I was raised as an entrepreneur. I guess we'll go back to that starting point. My father was an entrepreneur. Both sets of grandparents were entrepreneurs, and they raised my brother, my sister, and myself to all be entrepreneurs. And that's really all we've ever done. I had my first real company when I was 20 years old. I had 12 full-time employees working for me. I was running a house painting company during the summers while I was in university. And that's really where I cut my teeth at really running a real operational company. It was in the franchising space, and it was a company called College Pro Painters. And because it was a franchise, I was so scared of failing that I basically memorized a 300-page operations manual, which covered everything from operations, sales, marketing, hiring, interviewing, all aspects of running a company. And I got the real solid, kind of almost like a real world MBA at a very young age of running a business. Ended up starting coaching entrepreneurs for that company, College Pro Painters. By the time I was 28 years old, I'd coached 120 entrepreneurs, again, all running real companies. And that was by 1994. Coaching really didn't even become a thing in the business world until 1993. That was when the International Federation of Coaches and Coach U started. So when coaching in the business world was starting, I'd already coached 120 entrepreneurs, one of which was Kimball Musk, Elon's younger brother. I hired and trained Kimball Musk back in 93. And then I also trained his cousin, Peter Reeve, who went on to build Solar City. So I got very well known at an early age for coaching businesses, went on and became a co-founder of a franchising group for an auto body chain. It's now called Gerber Auto Collision in the United States. And in Canada, it's called Boyd Auto Body. It's about a $2 billion revenue company now. It became the largest collision repair company in the world. I exited that company and was hired as the president of a private currency business. We built that company up and exited 2 years later. And then I joined my best friend, Brian, who was building a junk removal business. It was called the Rubbish Boys, and he was changing the name over to call it 1-800-GOT-JUNK. I joined him as employee number 14, and I was the COO, and we built that up to 3,100 employees over 6.5 years, went from 2 million to 106 million in revenue. And then I started getting well known again for having done it for the 3rd or 4th time. People were wondering why. So I was being asked to do a lot of speaking events. I've been paid to speak now in 28 countries. I've been paid to speak on every single continent, including getting a check in Antarctica to speak to a group down there. I've written 6 business books now. I'm not 5, but I've now written my 6th one, just came out a year ago. And I started an organization called the COO Alliance, which is a large mastermind community for the second in command. I also have another mastermind community called the Ops Spot. And the Ops Spot is for anyone that works in operations roles. And it's an online mastermind community for managers and directors. And then I have a course called Invest in Your Leaders, which is a leadership skills program that companies put all their people through. So that's a quick tour of me.
Love that. There can't be many people that have spoke on every continent, including Antarctica.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be the first, but I wasn't the first. Somebody's done it before me. I don't remember who it was. I don't know the history of who was the first, but there's a handful for sure. There's not very many.
Wow.
They're mostly science. They're mostly science people, though.
Yeah, that makes sense. How many businesses have you founded?
How many have I founded? 1, 2, 3. I founded 4 companies that I started, and then there were 3 companies that I was a co-founder or COO of.
And has acquisition been part of the journey as well when you've been growing these companies, or has it been from within?
Acquisition was a part of the auto body business. I helped acquire 17 different companies for that business, and we put a really good formula in place. I've also coached a number of entrepreneurs to do acquisitions. One actually did 21 acquisitions, built and sold his company to 106 million. But yes, I did work on the acquisition side for the auto body side. The rest were all either greenfield or franchising or organic growth.
Yeah, love that. You mentioned the term second in command a couple of times. Let's unpack that a little bit. What who is that person and what do they do?
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. I'm using it by, intentionally, because you could call this the second in command is essentially the right hand to the CEO, right? The CEO will have a leadership team, but there's one person that they're going to lean on. There's one person they're going to have the strongest relationship with. There's one person that they're going to put all of their trust in. There's really one person that is their yin and yang to help them scale up and build that company, and that's usually a COO, but it could also be a vice president of operations or a director of operations, could be an ops manager. In the very early days, it might even just be your executive assistant, but it's who the CEO or the entrepreneur would look at as their second in command. In the book Traction by Gino Wickman, he talked about the visionary and the integrator. The second in command would be that integrator kind of a role.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And is it someone that, starts out in that business? Is it one of the first employees, for instance, or do they come in later?
It can be, but it's often somebody that's an outside hire. It's very rare that a founding person is going to have the skill set to scale that company past 10 or 30 employees, because that real early stage entrepreneurial, make it up on the fly, jack of all trades, master of none. It's really hard for that person to probably manage teams and teams of teams, which are other skill sets that you need when the company is starting to scale. So most businesses go through these natural transitions. I call them the ones and the threes. When you have one employee to 3 employees to 10 employees to 30 to 100 to 300 to 1,000, there are these different evolutions of a company. And an early stage person, when maybe there's 3 employees, when you go to 10, they're managing a bunch of people. When you go to 30, there's now a management team. When you go to 100, there's a leadership team. So it's usually that you're bringing in an outside person into the company, and that brings in some complexities as well, because you're now bringing in an outside person that causes ripple effects. You're bringing in some external skills. You're bringing in different personalities that the people don't necessarily know. And often the management team that's been reporting to the founder or reporting to an early stage leader is now going to report to someone else, and they have to learn that entire new style. So they go through this kind of forming, storming, norming, performing kind of a model at that stage.
Yeah. That idea about there being kind of plateaus, if you like, and different levels of business is an interesting one. And could one second in command, one COO, be capable of going through all those different plateaus and stages, or would you have a different one, a different level?
Great question. Again, it's based on the stage of the company. You have to look at the skill set of that leader in place. And it's very rare that a senior leader can stay in their role after the company has doubled in size twice under their leadership. So let's say you come into a company that's doing 5 million in revenue, it'll go to 10 million, that's one double. It'll go to 20 million, that's the second double. You're probably capable still, but it's really hard for you to manage the company at 40 million when you started at 5, because effectively it's now 8 times bigger, right? 3 doubles. So it's hard. Ben Horowitz, who wrote The Hard Thing About Hard Things, says you can only go through one triple, from 5 to 15 million, but it's hard to go from 15 million to 45 million. So it's around that same kind of data point that I think of. So the only way that a senior leader can really stay with the company is if they join a company that is usually easier for them to run. When I joined 1-800 Got Junk, it was such a small business that for the first 2 or 3 years, it was really easy because the complexities hadn't caught up with what I was already used to running. Mm-hmm. But the second part is that they have to grow their skills, right? As the company grows, the leader has to continue to grow, right? As the complexity of the business grows, their complexity of their operational skill set needs to grow. The complexity of being able to manage teams, matrix decision-making, manage more complicated P&Ls. So the leaders have to grow their skill set ahead of the curve of how the company is growing. Otherwise, they're going to get replaced.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where do you find these people?
They're certainly not on Craigslist or Indeed looking for a job, right? The best employees are never out looking for a job. The best employees are not out trying to find the next step in their career. They're usually running a business, and you have to entice them away. You've got to poach them away from a place that they're not happy, poach them away from a place that they're maybe not being as challenged as they want to be, or they're over challenged, and you need to bring them into the right opportunity. So it's all about crafting a really solid scorecard and job description, getting an amazing copywriter to polish it, and really trying to entice them. So I like using some really solid executive recruiters. I have an amazing executive recruiting firm that I've told my clients to use for the last decade, and they only focus on the second in command, that COO role.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Whenever I think of recruiting, I always think, when you see a CV, and now with AI, of course, that can look incredible. It can be written by technology. So do you have any particular hints or tips or things that you use when you're interviewing someone to make sure you've got the right person?
It's probably one of my biggest pet peeves is entrepreneurs walk around talking about how hard it is to run businesses. I think it's extraordinarily simple if you have the skill sets. Most entrepreneurs and most entrepreneurial companies have never been trained on how to do interviews. So they have no idea how to do a proper job interview. They have no idea how to grade a resume and how to rate and prepare resume notes and prepare interview questions. They have no idea how to interview for behavioral traits or for skill set. They have no idea how to do proper reference checks. They have no idea how to actually compare candidates against each other based on the skills and behavioral traits they're looking for. So they're winging it. And then at the end of the day, they feel hopeful when they've hired somebody, and they wait 90 days to see if it's worked out. The problem isn't the candidates that you're hiring. The problem is the skill set of the leaders and managers that don't know how to interview. So it's actually one of the core 12 skills in my Invest in Your Leaders course is teaching people how to do a proper job interview so that they can have predictability in their hiring process.
Yeah. What about, or do you teach the leader to do that, or would you outsource that process?
It depends. I usually outsource for the senior hire, the recruiting of skilled candidates to come into the first in-depth interviews in our company. So they're going through resumes, they're screening through all the deadwood, they're finding out if there's a good cultural fit, but then we're going to interview them completely. I would never rely on an executive recruiting firm to do all the interviewing for me, because it's kind of like the fox watching the hen house, right? Their incentive is for you to hire someone. So I'm still going to put those candidates through a group interview process, put them through a couple of test hoops, put them through a very, very in-depth first interview, a very in-depth second interview, put them through a proper top grading process. So we're really going to run through the normal interviewing process, which requires the managers and leaders in our company to know how to do a job interview and know how to hire people.
Yeah. And how much emphasis do you put on their communication and their personality, I guess?
It depends on the role, right? If you're hiring an engineer, communication and personality doesn't often matter because they're sitting in a black box and they're writing code. Or if it's a payroll clerk, they're sitting in a fairly functional role. But if there's a sales or marketing person, they're going to have to interact with different business areas. It might rise up the ladder. It's like saying, how detail oriented does someone have to be? Well, if they're in finance, they have to be very detail oriented. If they're in sales, they don't have to be detail oriented at all. They have to be a problem solver. They have to be able to think on their feet. They have to be gregarious. They have to be a good leader. They have to be able to, build relationships. So the personality profiles or the behavioral traits of the candidate has to match the job that they're actually interviewing for. It doesn't go across the organization. Core values go across the organization, right? Everyone already has to live the same core values, but the traits have to match the job description and the role that you're hiring for.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And what about then? So you've used your EA recruiter. They've found some good people, some candidates. You've taken through the process. You've chosen your ideal candidate. Do you then have a process or a flow to take someone through their onboarding? Presumably, they're not just sort of left to get on with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, it's another critical step in the process. Yeah, I'll give it a really good example. If you run a marketing company, your company tends to be very good at marketing, but you're probably very bad at all of the rest of running a company. It's like if you're a dentist, you're very good at dentistry, but you're bad at running a dental practice. If you're a good lawyer, you're good at being a lawyer, but you're not very good at running a company. Most companies don't get the skills on running meetings, doing interviews, doing onboarding, delegating projects, managing project lists, managing time, handling conflict. All of the skills that are in my Invest in Your Leaders course are the skills that a company needs to function. So onboarding of employees is critical, because if you just hire someone and put them into their job, they're going to fail. They need to be indoctrinated into the culture. They need to understand your core values. They need to understand the history of the company. They need to understand each of the different members of the leadership team or management team. They need to understand the processes that are used internally. They need to understand the vivid vision of where you're taking the company and what the company looks like in the future. The new team members should be sitting in on every form of training that happens. They should be sitting in on meetings in different business areas to understand the business before they start working in their job. So usually there should be at least a 2-week to a 4-week onboarding process of every single person that comes into a company. And most companies just hire the person and get them started, and that's where the problems start.
Yeah, I've most definitely been guilty of that over the years as well. And I think for me, because I like problem solving, I like being dropped in at the deep end and finding things out. So we took a couple of managing directors on early on, and I'd be like, right, there you go, off you go, and kind of set them up to fail, really, because I would have enjoyed that, but they didn't.
Well, and the reality is most people would rather have the shortcuts. Most people would rather have the cheat sheets so that they can quickly get success and feel good about their progress and feel good about their work. Most people don't like to rack their, working hard on the problem is like the fly trying to get out the window. You're going to keep banging your head on the window. But if somebody shows you there's a door right over here and you can just turn and go out the door, most people would enjoy that shortcut, regardless of what role you're in. But the companies don't understand that. So they end up, again, as you put it, they end up setting their people up for failure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are the traits, or are there any particular traits that you look for in the second in command?
Yeah, the first one is they have to be really good at building people and building teams, really good at growing people. They have to be good at fostering good, healthy debate and bringing out the good conflict so that people can argue and debate on issues for the good of the company. They have to really have a good understanding of business as a whole. Whereas if you're the head of marketing, you normally just need to understand marketing. If you're the head of engineering, you have to understand engineering. The second in command, or the COO, needs to understand the entire business, how business areas work together, how people work together, how projects fit. They have to understand the use of resources like people, time, and money. They need to understand the P&L and budgeting. So there's more of a broader lens that they need to have into the business.
Yeah. And you mentioned, fostering healthy debate. Presumably part of that is challenging the CEO or the founder as well.
Yeah, there's an old story, I think it was an Aesop's fable, of the emperor's new suit, right? And it's the king that has this magic suit of clothes made for him, and this tailor is telling him how perfect he looks in these clothes, but the clothes are invisible, but they look so beautiful, but he won't be able to see them. So the king's out marching in a parade, and he's basically in his underwear, thinking he's wearing this invisible suit of clothing, but he feels naked. And this 2-year-old kid says, "But the king is naked." And then the king realizes everyone's laughing at him. The COO needs to be the one who can privately tell the king or the CEO they're naked. They need to be able to privately tell the CEO that there's problems. They need to be able to privately tell the CEO that something's going wrong or they don't like their ideas, and challenge them for the good of the company, for the good of the objectives, for the good of the vivid vision. And they need to do it in a way that they protect the confidence and protect the ego of that CEO, right? They need to do it not in front of the rest of the employees. It's almost like a husband and wife need to have good arguments, but not in front of the kids. You need to have the good, healthy debates, but not in front of the kids.
Yeah. Do they have to be friends?
They have to like each other and respect each other, but they don't have to be hanging out as friends, 7 days a week. Brian and I, when we built 1-800-GOT-JUNK together, had a very unfair advantage. He was my best man at my wedding 3 months before I joined him to start working with him. And we'd been in a mastermind group where we met every month for 4 years together. He watched me build 2 other companies, and I was watching him build his company. So we had like a 4-year interview getting to know each other before we got to start. So we were very lucky. But no, you have to be able to respect the other person, like to spend time with the other person, but you're not married to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And you definitely don't have to have been their best man.
No, not at all.
Not a prerequisite.
No.
So obviously you mentioned before, you've spoken in 28 countries, every continent. What are some of the key lessons that you like to promote during those talks?
I've got country number 29 booked. I'll be speaking. Oh, and number 30, I'm speaking in, no, Ibiza's not, I've already spoken in Spain, but I'm speaking in Dublin twice in May. So I get to cross off number 29. I typically talk around a few core areas. One is an area around growing your people, right? The more that we grow our leaders, the more they'll grow the company if we grow them on all the executive functioning skills. So that's one. I talk a lot about my newest book, The Second in Command, what we've been chatting about now, and how do you actually recruit and hire and onboard one. In fact, I'm doing a speaking event in person this morning in the United States. I'm actually over in San Diego right now. I'm going on stage in a couple of hours to speak about bringing a second in command into your company. I speak a lot about building a world-class company culture and how do you actually turn your company into a magnet for great people. I got well known because 1-800-GOT-JUNK ranked as the #2 company in all of Canada to work for. And then I went on to coach a number of companies that started becoming #1 in their country. One went on to become #2 in the United States on Glassdoor. So I got very well known for building company cultures. And then I guess a fourth area is around growth. Just how do you actually set up a company for hyper growth? And hyper growth is 100% growth year over year. 25% growth 3 years in a row gets you out doubling your company every 3 years. But I'm used to growing companies much faster than that.
Wow. Yeah. Hyper growth. That sounds like there's a lot of lessons to learn along the way.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your key lessons, I guess? Have you made any mistakes along the way? Is there anything that if you could go back 20 years and tell your younger self, like, is there any lessons that you would get across?
Yeah, it's interesting. Chapter, I think it's 17 of my first book, Double Double. I wrote a series of what I called letters to my younger self. And it was around 60 different lessons that truly sunk in after having built all these different companies. So a few of them are, I'll kind of go off the top of my head here. Well, one is, obsessing about growing people. The leader's core job is to grow people, not to do work. I get tired of hearing executives saying, I'm too busy or I can't delegate it because they don't have the skills. Delegate that project and grow their skill set. Spend your time growing people, not doing work. That's a big one. Another one is that if you hire people, your job is to listen to them, right? God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We need to use them in that ratio. We need to listen twice as often as we speak. And leaders tend to speak too frequently. We tend to not listen to the team. And we almost bankrupted our company at the $100 million mark because our head of finance was asking if we should be more cautious, was saying he was nervous about the financials. But we were like, no, we got this. No, we got this. And what I realized was he was so quiet and we didn't give him the space to really talk. And if we weren't willing to listen to him, we should have hired someone we were willing to listen to. That was a big one. There's lots. Yeah. There's so many lessons.
Yeah, that's definitely a big lesson. And you mentioned a few times, about bringing out the best in the people you bring on, coaching them, mentoring them. Is that all about skill set, or does mindset come into it as well?
Yeah, I visualize every employee like they're climbing up 2 ladders beside each other, right? And their left hand and left foot is climbing up the skills ladder, and their right hand and right foot are climbing up the confidence ladder. So our job as a leader is to grow their skills and grow their confidence so they can grow their skills, which grows their confidence, which allows them to take on more project and grow their skills, right? You're constantly moving them up those 2 things. If one of those ladders is ever shaky, right? If the skills ladder is shaky, that hurts their confidence. If their confidence ladder is shaky, it hurts their skills. It's always about growing them up those 2 ladders. So the leader's core job is to praise people, to thank people, to help remove obstacles from them, to show them their progress. And we often break people down by showing them all the areas to work on and what they have to fix and what's broken, instead of constantly showing them all the good things that they're doing.
Yeah, I love that. So I like that idea of increasing their confidence so they can take on a little bit more. And then after they've done that, increase confidence again, and it just keeps moving up.
Yeah, exactly right.
So what's next for Alliance and yourself? What you've already done some amazing things. So yeah, what's next?
Yeah, so it's the COO Alliance is the only network of its kind in the world for that second in command. And I guess what's next for us is just continuing our global expansion, right? We have members now from 17 countries. So it's continuing to build a really good ecosystem for that second in command to grow and collaborate with each other. We have an event coming up in April in Vancouver where we'll have about 50 different COOs from all over the world coming in. And then we have another at MIT. But we run 2-hour events online every month. So it's just continuing to scale up and grow that organization is really the focus.
Love that. You mentioned before about 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and you scaled that quickly. What do you attribute that growth to?
Well, it's interesting. When I walked into the company back in October of 2000, I said to Brian, who is the founder, that we had to focus on 3 core things very quickly. Number one, we had to raise our prices because no one was making money. He wasn't making money. The company wasn't making money. The franchisees weren't making money. The guys out in the trucks weren't getting paid enough. So I raised our prices by 40% across the board. And people thought I was crazy. People thought we were going to bankrupt the company. But I'm like, we're already going bankrupt. Like, we need to raise profit so that everybody. So that was number one, is priced ourselves accordingly so that we could become that Starbucks of junk removal or the FedEx of junk removal. We priced ourselves at a premium price and delivered a premium service. Number two was, I said we had to build something that was a little bit more than a business and a little bit less than a religion. We had to build a culture that was so strong that we would become a cult, like, because we could attract more people into the business. Because if we were going to grow quickly, we had to attract really great people into a company that wasn't quite there yet. So we really worked hard at building that strong company culture. And then number three was we had to generate a lot of free press for the company because we had no money for marketing. So we worked hard to teach people, the franchisees and the internal staff, on how to generate press coverage with TV and radio, and in the early stage with bloggers and e-zines and magazines and newspapers, and getting coverage about us so that the media could tell our story. And that was a much cheaper way for us to get marketing out there than it was to actually, spend the money on marketing and advertising that we have a budget for. Those were probably the 3 core things that we worked on.
Fantastic. And throughout the process, and as you're training more CEOs, COOs, is there a limit to the number of people they can manage? So how many managers underneath them?
Yeah, so there's the old adage that one person can only manage 8 people. The CEO should only manage 5, because they also have legal, culture, and their advisors. And I think of each of those as almost direct reports. So the most number of people that I think a CEO should ever manage is about 5. I agree that 8's an okay number, but I think I would rather prefer like a 5 or 6 for a COO to be managing at the same level. If you're managing 8 people or 8 plus, they have to be doing the exact same job. So if you've got 8 salespeople that are all selling the same product, yes, it's easy to manage them. But if you're managing operations and someone running IT and someone running finance and they're so different that you need time to think and be strategic. So that's when the number of direct reports would drop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. One of the main things we're talking about at the summit over these 3 days, is about growth through acquisition. You've obviously grown through acquisition as well, as you said before. Any tips for people that are going through that stage? Because integrating the businesses is one of the trickiest things, isn't it?
Well, I'll give you something on the acquisition side first. Is most people today that are looking to sell their company have an ego number or a golf course number. And the golf course number is the number that they want to tell their buddies they sold their company for. So what the opportunity is, everyone else is trying to negotiate the price of the purchase down. What I like to do is negotiate the terms of the sale. So I'll go to somebody and say, normally an average purchase price for me is the average of 1 times revenue plus 5 times profit. So let's say a company is doing $5 million in revenue and they're making $600,000 in profit. I'll pay them the average of 1 times revenue, which is 5 times 1, plus 600,000 times 5, which is 3 million. So the average of 5 million and 3 million is 4 million. I'll offer them $4 million for that company that's 5 million in revenue that does 600,000 in profit. But here's how I'll offer them the $4 million. I'll offer them 70% upfront and 30% paid over the next 3 years in equal quarterly installments. I'll go and meet with a small regional banker where I can actually have lunch with the president, where they actually are more of an entrepreneurial banker than a banker. And I'll get them to consider that 30% as equity in the deal. I'll get the funding for the 70% from the bank. The seller is now funding the other 30% over 3 years. I let the owner walk away day one because I don't need him. He's not going to want to do anything anyway. And I'll put someone in place. I typically thin out their finance and thin out their marketing and thin out their back end, because usually you can merge those two business areas. And I cut all of the expenses of that entrepreneur, and you can usually go cash flow positive after 6 months of operating. Then what I try to do on the integration side is I make sure that I integrate the company based on the vision and core values first. And I worry about changing the name of the business after 6 months and changing the operating systems of the company after 6 months. But I first try to get alignment around vision and core values. So even when we did all the acquisitions for Gerber Auto Collision and Boyd Auto Body, it would be, Fred's Auto Body, a Gerber Collision company. And then after a year, it might become even on the sign. It would be like Fred's Auto Body, Gerber Auto Collision. You'd see them even on the branding. And then after 2 years, you'd just see Gerber Auto Collision. So we kind of phase in the name. Most people think it's all about, it's got to be the same name. No, you got to have the same culture first. Whatever you call it, as Shakespeare said, a rose by any other name would still smell as sweet. We need to integrate the companies based on the cultural fit and the core values fit first.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think there's a danger as well if you change the name too soon that you might end up losing clients?
Well, again, it doesn't matter, right? If you're changing the name so soon, what does it matter? What the clients want to know is, are they being handled properly? Are they being cared for? So the most important things for the company are integrating the culture and the core values, and then getting into some of the systems integration and cutting all the expenses, so that then you can have the money to take care of the customers. You can have the money to take care of the employees. And if you do it with that kind of a formula and that kind of an approach, you can actually do a roll up quite simply or quite quickly.
We've got a question that's just come in from Ryan. So let's pose that one to you now, if that's okay. So yeah. How do you replace your COO if you don't want to lose that person in the business, but the role is now bigger than their skills? It's a great question.
This is like playing three-dimensional chess, right? You're kind of looking a couple of moves in advance and trying to figure out the moves. So you need to sit down with a person and let them know that you really, really care about them. You need to sit down with a person and let them know the vision of the company and where you're going. And then you need to show them the job posting and the scorecard for this new role, and show them how they don't fit, but that you still love them, you still care for them, and show them the role you're considering for them now that they'll play that is in their unique ability, and show them that the ability for them to actually work with this new leader and grow. So they're going to be able to grow their capacity, they're going to be able to grow their skill set, and they're going to get on the business that they're really good at, that feed them with energy. And you're going to be able to start taking stuff off their plate that is draining them of energy and currently making them, not as happy. Because that's typically what happens at this stage of the business. The person ends up working on things that they're just not happy with working on in the first place.
Yeah. Do you ever see as well where in a business people have been rewarded for doing a good job, so they get a promotion, and then they do well, so they get another promotion again, but they ended up being promoted into a position that they weren't qualified for?
Yeah, they end up getting promoted to their ceiling of complexity, right? They end up getting promoted to this level that they're not capable of doing. That usually happens because the company is so happy and they've got more work that needs to get done, so they give it to somebody who's performing, instead of saying, if I was hiring a full-time person, what would that person look like? And do we have that capability internally? And then likewise, they don't spend enough time growing the skill sets of those people that are now taking on more responsibility. So they don't train them on managing projects. They don't train them on leveraging situational leadership. They don't work with them on their coaching skills and running one-on-one meetings. Again, all of the skills in my Invest in Your Leaders course are the critical skills that you need to grow anyone managing people in. If you put people through those 12 modules, that gives them the capability to take on more and to grow the company to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You've obviously grown several companies, and now you're coaching, as you mentioned, and you can hear kind of the passion and enthusiasm for the coaching that you do. What is it that you love about it so much?
Well, I've done it forever. I love watching entrepreneurs when they're banging their head on the window and I can show them the path of least resistance and they go, oh, when I can show entrepreneurial companies the chance for them to actually scale in proven ways in a much faster way, or the chance for them to build a better company. And they're just like, you just see the light bulbs going off. That's fun for me.
Yeah. Do you find that most of the founders will be more of a visionary and a creative, and so the CEO is the yin to their yang, or do you ever get two very similar people in those positions?
Yeah, more often than not, especially a lot of the entrepreneurs that are in my group coaching programs. I have a group coaching where we do calls every month together online. Most of them are definitely the visionaries and they're integrators, but they're chasing the squirrels, right? They're distracted by the big shiny objects. So they're often good at getting stuff done, but they're not necessarily good at getting the right stuff done and putting the right foundational things in place. If they were building a home as an example, they'd be great at hiring or finding the great cabinets and buying the great Wolf stove, but they're really bad at building the foundation and putting in the electrical and the plumbing and the drywall. And they can sometimes get in their own way. So often what we try to do is pull the entrepreneur back a little bit and have them start delegating everything except genius so that they can work on the areas of the business they're really good at. And they can slowly start hiring a unique ability team around them who can work on the parts of the business that drain them of energy and that need to get done, but they need to get done by someone else who actually likes those parts of the business.
Yeah. So have people in the right places who not only have the skill set, but enjoy it as well.
Exactly. There's lots of those people out there. Someone running finance loves finance. I hate finance, right? Somebody running engineering likes engineering. I don't understand engineering. So you just find the person who loves those areas and they're really good at it, and your business really starts to scale quite quickly.
Yeah. So it's about finding people better than you in certain areas and hiring them.
Right. And that's a skill set that, again, most companies don't have, right? If you build houses, you're probably not good at understanding how to find people. If you're a marketing person, you're probably not good at finding people. These are all executive functioning skills that we need to learn so that our companies can scale. So that's the stuff that, would be in my group coaching or in my course or in my books.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you're running calls like this, is so people can work on themselves and work on their business and not in the business.
Yeah, exactly. Another question from Daniel. What specific strategies can I implement to enhance my leadership skills in a fast-paced business environment?
Great question. So I was just in Qatar. I think Daniel's based in Qatar. I would lean out into the future and look at what your company looks like and feels like 3 years from now, and then look back to where you are today and try to identify some gaps. So try to figure out, if this is where I'm going to be and this is where I am skill set wise, that should show you what skills you're going to start to need, right? If you realize that over the next 12 months, you're going to have to hire 15 people, you should probably really work at your recruiting, interviewing, onboarding of talent. But if you're only hiring one person, maybe you actually have to work at your, project management or at your budgeting and your P&L side. So I just like doing a gap analysis, reverse engineering where I'm going and where I am, and then using that gap analysis to show me what to work on.
Yeah, I like that. I like that for setting big goals as well. Like, set a huge goal and then figure out who you need to be to achieve that. And then again, work backwards. What do I need to do today if I want to be here in 10 years?
Exactly.
Another question's popped up in the other chat here as well. What is the number one way operations fall apart?
Wow, the number one way operation, it's usually by not showing enough gratitude and not praising people, right? It's by not caring about the people and burning people out. And you end up creating a toxic culture or a negative culture or a culture that's drained of energy. And you constantly need to work on showing that gratitude, celebrating all the successes, taking pause and celebrating the 3 projects we just completed before we roll out 3 new projects that we need to get started on. So it's usually, driving the car forward and looking in the window where you're going, but it's looking in the rearview mirror to see how far you've come and appreciating that journey.
Yeah, very often I think it's easy, isn't it, to focus on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And they say don't pause and celebrate how far you've come.
Exactly right.
Yeah. You mentioned, going slightly off topic, perhaps, you mentioned gratitude a moment ago, and it's about praising people where praise is due. But it made me think about, a lot of people nowadays are talking about the morning routine of successful people, and gratitude diaries often come into there. So, like I say, we're going off on a tangent slightly somewhat, but do you have a morning routine?
Well, one of my 6 books was The Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs that I co-authored with Hal Elrod. So yes, I definitely have a morning routine. So we follow the morning sabers, which is the silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. So the silence is just kind of when you wake up in the morning, it's just not jumping out of bed and getting started. It's not hopping on your phone right away. It's just settling into the morning and listening to the sounds around you and feeling grateful for being alive and just allowing your brain to kind of catch up a little bit. The affirmations is usually giving yourself some kind of a mantra or a confidence boost. And it's usually a saying or something that is going to get you to feel good, whether you're doing it in the mirror or doing it when you're lying in bed. It's that little affirmation that you give yourself first thing in the morning. The visualization can be reading part of your vivid vision, or it could be thinking about something you're doing that day and seeing it in a really good way. Like I'm going on stage in a couple of hours, I can visualize myself walking out onto the stage, seeing the audience, feeling the rush of energy, and getting ready to deliver a really amazing session to them. And if I can feel myself in that moment, when I execute on it, I'm going to come off in a better way. Exercises can just even be a simple going for a quick morning walk, which for me is part of my routine. I just like going for a morning walk and going for coffee somewhere because it gets the blood going. I get some early energy. Maybe it's a 7-minute workout. I prefer to do my real workouts in the gym at the end of the day because it breaks up my day. But doing something first thing in the morning, if it's a few burpees or some push-ups or going for a walk, something just to get the blood going. And then reading is just, the 10 minutes of just actually reading a book, right? Reading something about personal growth or business growth, usually something that's not the news, right? But reading something that's helping you move yourself forward. And then the scribing is the journaling, right? It's the 5-minute journal that Alex Icon and UJ Ramdas wrote years ago. I'm friends with both of them. In fact, Alex is actually at an event with my wife right now in Bali. Just doing some kind of journaling when you're thinking about yourself, you're thinking about your growth, you're thinking about the situations that you're in, and getting some of those ideas out of your mind is a really helpful process. And then I also add to that where I do apple cider vinegar in the morning. I usually do some lemon and water first thing in the morning. I have a green drink that I drink. I met the founder of Athletic Greens years ago, so AG1 is really good. And then I have a series of different probiotics and vitamins that I take every day.
Love that.
That would be my routine.
Love that, yeah. How long has that been part of your routine?
Probably about 6-7 years. And for me, and I even wrote about this in the Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs, that if you have a shitty morning, don't stop your routine. Just tomorrow, start again, right? If you miss a couple of steps, don't beat yourself up about it. Start tomorrow, start again, right? It's not about having the perfect routine every single day. It's about progress, not perfection.
Do you have an evening routine as well? Like, do you close down the day as well?
I do and I don't. My wife has a very, very strong evening routine. Mine's getting better just because I'm around her and kind of seeing the routine. And it's really about sleep habits. So I'll walk you through some of what our evening routines are. I definitely shut off work at around 5:30 or 6 o'clock, where I just don't do work because I'm never going to catch up, right? So there's no point on doing work at night because I'm going to have more goals or more projects or buy another company tomorrow anyway. So the whole I'm going to catch up tonight is usually a lie. So I shut it down. We usually start to dim the lights in the household around 7:30 or 8 o'clock. So there's no real bright lights on. We both have red light glasses that we'll wear at the end of the day, which cuts out any of the screens. Our screens on our phones are dimmed into night mode automatically at 6 p.m. So there's not as much blue light coming off the screens. We definitely switch off. I'll cut out caffeine after 12 o'clock. So I won't have any caffeine at 12 o'clock, which allows the half-life of coffee to be out of my system by bedtime. We turn the temperature in our rooms down. So we turn that down to about 18 degrees Celsius so that we can actually fall asleep in a colder environment. We have these little white noise machines that we travel with because we're nomads. So we play white noise in the room so that we actually cut out all the ambient noise around us. Wax earplugs that we wear at night for sleeping. We actually sleep in separate beds so that we actually don't wake each other up in the middle of the night. We wake up as happier people in the morning. What else do I have? Oh, an evening shower, which drops your internal body temperature down. So those are some of the evening routine things that I do. And I actually do all those. So yeah, I guess I do.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, well, I'm getting there, and then listed like 10 things.
Yeah.
So to finish off, then we've had some incredible lessons there, hints and tips and things for people to follow when they're scaling their companies. If there was just one closing piece of advice, what would it be?
None of this shit matters. This is just what we do to make money. The stuff that really matters is your relationships with yourself, relationships with your spouse, your friends, your family, and enjoying life, right? Ripping off the bucket list and enjoying what you do, enjoying every day, because at the end of the day, none of us are getting out of this alive. So it's just remembering that I think if we're all so serious and we're always working on business, we forget to have fun along the journey.
Yeah, find out what's really important to us. And if people are watching, whether they're live, whether it's on a replay or whether it's later on YouTube, and they think, I've got to work with Cameron, how do they get in touch with you and the COO Alliance?
Yeah, go and take a look at the Cameron Herold website. So it's Cameron and it's Herold. So CameronHerold.com. And that has links to the course, the COO Alliance, all of my books. The Second in Command podcast is a great one. We get about 100,000 listeners monthly on our podcast. So all those resources are there. And then all 6 of my books are available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes.
Fantastic. Cameron, well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I shall let you go and get ready for your stage performance in San Diego. It was. But thank you very much for your time. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye. Bye now.